Welcome back to Peasant Level Craft. Today we're building the Peasant's Hut. You'll need a sheet of ready board from the Dollar Tree, $1. Then our standard tools. We'll be using these for most builds on the channel. Now the $2 you spend on purchasing things for this build will actually make several huts. You're going to be cutting a lot of wood to make the roof. I choose to use the nippers, but you can use anything. Now we're going to start laying out our house. The walls are 5 inches long by 2 inches high. The end caps, one which will have the door, are 3 inches wide and 2 inches tall. Additionally, each of the peaked roofs will add 1.5 inches of height. To make the best cuts, you'll want a brand new blade. If you have a utility knife like I do, you can just snap off the end of the blade. So that the walls are square, you'll want to make 90-degree cuts. Hold your knife as straight up and down in relationship to the ready board as you can while you make these long drawing cuts. Take your time. Now, in order to fill in the underlayment foam core for the roof, you're going to need to know how wide the angle of the pitch is. In this case, it's 2.5 inches. Keep in mind, you will want to trim the actual wood for the roof significantly longer so you have an overhang. Now that we know how wide to make the roof, it's just a matter of cutting it out. Peel the paper off the foam core. Most crafters do use ready board for this exact reason. It's cheap, and the glue that keeps the paper on the foam board is incredibly weak. It's very easy to peel off. Draw on a door. I just used the measurements on my cutting board. Each one of those squares is a 1/2 inch. I went 1.5 inches high by 1 inch wide, figuring that each figure has a 5-foot base for a medium figure. It works out rather well. Now start making bricks. I always start with the doorways and the windows, as I find it makes the rest of the layout easier. Use a pencil and push firmly at an angle, but not too hard. You don't want to penetrate too deeply into the foam. It's very thin. To keep your brick straight, just trace over straight to the next piece. This will ensure your corners line up. Now grab your ball of aluminum foil. Roll it firmly onto the bricks. This will add texture and cracks and crevices to your brickwork. For the purposes of making a peasant level crafting video, I chose to use the easiest glue and the most available glue, just white school glue, PVA. The problem with PVA is, unlike tacky glue or super glue, it takes a long time to dry. So we're going to use pins to pin the walls into place. Cut the long edges, both sides, of each roof piece. This will ensure that the roof pieces fit well against themselves and also fit well where they connect to the wall. Cut at a 45-degree angle. Then, like you just did, glue and then pin it into place. As always, between steps, make sure you're taking the time to let your project dry. It is so important. Do not skip that. Don't rush ahead. Now, all peasant level crafters mess up, and I'm no exception. What I should have done at this point was just cut the entire ceiling, the part we just did, longer than the walls, and that would have provided the overhang. Now that it had dried, I realized that I hadn't done that and I had to make it up with wood. So I kind of scratch fit together all these little pieces and hope for the best. Remove your pins. A pair of needle nose pliers will do this job easily. I opted for an inch overhang. Measure and then cut. So before we put the roof on, it's time to paint the walls. We're going to use our old mixture of water, color, in this case black, and glue. This will help seal it even further. Now we're going to dry brush everything with a light gray. This will make the stones start to pop out. The final light dry brush is a off-white or tan. Now this will really pop the edges of the stones. As before, load up your brush with paint and then wipe most of it off on a paper towel. Then just go to town. Now it's time to make the roof. You'll need your coffee stirrers, your pair of snips, white glue, a pencil, and a ruler. What you're going to want to do is line one up and create a master that you use to cut the rest of the coffee stirrers. You can stack the coffee stirrers up to 4 high. This will make the cut slightly irregular as the shears will move when they move through the coffee stirrers. I like this because it gives me some variation at the bottom. It makes it look hand-hewn. You can get 2 roof pieces out of each coffee stirrer. Make sure that you preserve the factory edge on at least one side of each piece. The factory edge is nice and flat and it lines up well at the peak of the roof. Now simply glue them on. Coffee stirrers are not what we call a square piece of wood. They have warp to them, they have bends to them. I like using those pieces. I don't just throw them away if they're not too extreme, because when you're dry brushing later, it really gives it some surface to grab onto. No matter how well you plan, how many times you measure, you will always have too little or too many roof tiles. Don't fret, just save your master so that you can cut more. Sometimes when the moon is full, magic is in the air, and you have one tile left. That's when you can slap on your master, and let me tell you, it feels good. Okay, now we're going to cover up these brick seams. No measuring required, just take whatever scraps you have laying around, or even full sticks, and just slap some glue on, hold them in place, and then trim. Using your scrap, make a small door that'll fit over the one you carved earlier. Using your dark brown, paint all exposed wood. Make sure you get underneath the roof line. You will not see that from the tabletop, but you'll know it's there, and if you do a job right, you never feel embarrassed by it. Now remember, these coffee stirrers have width, especially on the door and the wall pieces that you use to hide the seams. Those will have edges that need to be carefully drawn on. Use a sharp pointed brush and take great care not to color your bricks by accident. Now, if you wanted to, you could call it done right here. It would certainly look good from 2 feet away. I kept going because I like to layer colors. So next we're going to move on to a dry brushing with a lighter brown. The one I use is called cinnamon. This just adds some depth and tone to the brown. We're going to add further depth in just a moment with the dry brushing of an off-white. Go lightest of all with this. You just want to hit the edges. You don't want to cake this on. Be very gentle and make sure your brush isn't loaded too heavily. My favorite wash of all time for doing wood, Citadel's Seraphim Sepia. It takes the white highlights and turns them into a calm gold, and I really love the effect. Next, some dollar store super glue and an old little piece of wire that I wrapped into a circle around a paintbrush. This will act as a door handle. And that's it, you're done. These are workhorses for your tabletop. These get a lot of work done. These can work in Warhammer, it's a feudal agri world. This can be D&D, this can be Frostgrave, this could be Warcry. This works. You will get a lot of use out of these, and I've made a ton of them. To all my new subscribers, I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for jumping on board and liking what I did. To all those who've watched it, thank you so much. And especially thank you to bolterbunny.com. It's a friend of mine's gaming store that he started up, and they were kind enough to sponsor us. So do me a solid and go visit bolterbunny.com. Fitting walls together squarely requires you to hold your knife at a 90... To keep your brick straight, just try... God, words. How do words?